Jennifer Aniston has spent decades living under one of Hollywood's brightest spotlights. Every relationship has been photographed. Every breakup has been analyzed. Every smile beside a famous man has sparked another round of headlines. Brad Pitt, Vince Vaughn, John Mayer, Justin Theroux. Even her legendary on-screen connection with David Schwimmer became part of the conversation. But beneath all those famous names is a love story that often gets overlooked. A relationship from before Friends, before global fame, before Jennifer Aniston became one of the most recognizable women in the world. And years later, when Jennifer looked back on that chapter of her life, her words revealed just how deeply that relationship had affected her. She described him as her first love and admitted that, had she been older and wiser at the time, things might have turned out very differently. So who was the man Jennifer Aniston once believed could have been the one? And why did this early romance leave such a lasting mark on the actress? Today we're going back to the beginning, before Brad Pitt, before the tabloids, before Rachel Green, before the world knew her name. This is the forgotten love story of Jennifer Aniston. Before she was Rachel Green. Long before Jennifer Aniston became Rachel Green, she was simply a young actress trying to figure out where she belonged. Born on February 11, 1969, in Sherman Oaks, California, Jennifer grew up around the entertainment industry. Her father, John Aniston, was a respected television actor, while her mother, Nancy Dow, had also worked as an actress. Hollywood was already part of her world. But having famous parents didn't mean Jennifer was handed an easy path. Her parents divorced when she was only 9 years old, an experience that would become one of the earliest emotional turning points in her life. Jennifer later spoke about the impact of growing up in a complicated family environment and how those early experiences shaped her understanding of relationships. She learned very young that people could love each other and still separate, that relationships could feel permanent one moment and completely different the next. And perhaps that is part of why love would become such a complicated subject throughout her life. As a teenager, Jennifer discovered acting. She studied drama and began performing in school productions before eventually moving into professional theater. But success was still a long way away. She wasn't immediately the Hollywood superstar everyone knows today. She worked. She struggled. She auditioned. She took small roles. And, like countless actors before her, she experienced rejection after rejection. Jennifer even worked ordinary jobs to support herself while pursuing acting. At that point, there was no guarantee that she would ever become famous. No friends. No international magazine covers. No millions of dollars per episode. Just a young actress trying to make her dream happen. And somewhere during those early years, she met a man who would become incredibly important to her. His name was Daniel McDonald. The love before fame. Daniel McDonald was also an actor. The two met while they were both still young and working toward their careers. Unlike Jennifer's later romances, this relationship didn't begin with photographers waiting outside expensive restaurants. There were no massive headlines. No millions of fans watching their every move. They were simply two young people trying to build lives in an unpredictable industry. And Jennifer fell deeply in love. The relationship reportedly lasted around 5 years. Think about that for a moment. 5 years. For someone who was still young, those years represented a huge portion of her early adult life. This wasn't a brief Hollywood fling. It wasn't a publicity relationship. It wasn't a romance created by two movie stars needing attention. It was a relationship that existed before Jennifer Aniston became Jennifer Aniston. Before millions of people had an opinion about who she should date. Before every breakup became international news. And that is exactly what made it different. Years later, Jennifer would look back on Daniel with remarkable tenderness. She remembered him as her first love and acknowledged how important he had been during that period of her life. She even suggested that if she had been older and less reckless, he could potentially have been the person she ended up with. That statement changes the way you look at Jennifer's later romantic history. Because when people talk about the loves of Jennifer Aniston's life, they usually begin with Brad Pitt. But Jennifer's own memories point much further back. To a time when nobody knew who she was. Why they didn't last. So what happened? Why didn't Jennifer and Daniel stay together? The simplest answer may also be the most painful. They were young. Jennifer was still discovering who she was, what she wanted, and where her career would take her. Daniel was pursuing his own acting ambitions. Their relationship existed during a period of enormous uncertainty. And sometimes two people can love each other deeply while still being unable to build a future together. There doesn't have to be a villain. There doesn't have to be betrayal. There doesn't have to be a dramatic Hollywood scandal. Sometimes timing is enough. Jennifer's career was beginning to move forward. She was determined to succeed. And the life she eventually built was far bigger than either of them could have predicted. But the relationship ended shortly before her career-changing breakthrough. That timing would make the story even more bittersweet, because Jennifer was about to enter a completely different world, and Daniel would never get to experience that journey with her. Then came Hollywood. After Daniel, Jennifer continued working. She appeared in television projects that failed to gain momentum. Some were canceled quickly. Others barely made an impact. There were moments when she reportedly questioned whether acting was really going to work out. Then came the role that changed everything. Rachel Green. When Jennifer joined Friends in 1994, nobody could have predicted the cultural phenomenon the series would become. Suddenly, Jennifer wasn't just an actress. She was a global star. Rachel's haircut became a phenomenon. Her clothes became fashion inspiration. Her relationship with Ross became one of television's most famous romances. And Jennifer Aniston became one of the biggest stars of the 1990s. But fame came with a price. Her personal life was no longer private. Every boyfriend became a headline. Every breakup became a story. And eventually, Jennifer's romantic history became almost as famous as her acting career. Tate Donovan, Love Meets Television. One of Jennifer's first major relationships after her early romance with Daniel was with actor Tate Donovan. The couple began dating in the mid-1990s, right as Jennifer's career was exploding. They were together for several years. But their breakup created one of the strangest situations in Friends history. Tate Donovan was eventually cast on the show as Joshua, a love interest for Rachel. Imagine having to perform romantic scenes with the person you had just broken up with. On television, Rachel and Joshua were supposed to fall for each other. Behind the scenes, Jennifer and Tate were dealing with the emotional reality of their breakup. Donovan later acknowledged how difficult the situation was. It was Hollywood irony at its finest. The relationship had ended, but the television characters had to pretend theirs was just beginning. And that was only the start of Jennifer's increasingly public romantic life. Then came Brad Pitt. In 1998, Jennifer Aniston's life changed again. Brad Pitt entered the picture. At the time, Pitt was already one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. Jennifer was becoming television royalty. Together, they became Hollywood's ultimate power couple. Their relationship quickly captured the public imagination. In 1999, they made their relationship public at the Emmy Awards. Then came the engagement. Then the wedding. In July 2000, Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt married in Malibu in an extravagant ceremony attended by family, friends, and some of Hollywood's biggest names. For years, they looked almost untouchable. They were beautiful, successful, young, famous, and apparently happy. But eventually, their marriage came under intense pressure. In 2005, Jennifer and Brad announced their separation. The world immediately wanted an explanation. Then Angelina Jolie entered the story. The media transformed the breakup into one of the biggest celebrity narratives of the decade. Jennifer became the heartbroken ex-wife. Brad became half of Hollywood's newest power couple. And suddenly, millions of people were choosing sides. But Jennifer herself refused to turn the situation into a public war. Over the years, she repeatedly tried to move beyond the narrative. She didn't want her entire identity reduced to the woman who lost Brad Pitt. And that distinction matters, because Jennifer's life was never just about one marriage. The media tried to define her. After Brad, Jennifer dated Vince Vaughn, then John Mayer, then Justin Theroux. Each relationship became another chapter in the Hollywood rumor machine. Photographers followed them. Magazines speculated about weddings. Fans predicted pregnancies. Every public appearance became evidence of something. And Jennifer eventually became increasingly vocal about the unfair way the media discussed her personal life. Perhaps the most painful example involved years of pregnancy speculation. Jennifer eventually revealed that she had privately gone through fertility struggles and IVF treatments. The revelation changed the meaning of years of headlines. For years, strangers had discussed her body, her marriage, and whether she would become a mother. But behind those headlines was a deeply personal struggle she had been experiencing privately. It was another reminder that the public rarely knows the full story. And Jennifer increasingly chose to protect that private side of herself. Justin Theroux. Eventually came Justin Theroux. Their relationship was different. They had known each other through mutual connections before becoming romantically involved, and their relationship developed into a serious partnership. They became engaged. Then, in 2015, they married in a private ceremony. Once again, Jennifer appeared to have found stability. But in 2018, they announced their separation. And once again, Jennifer handled the ending differently from the way Hollywood expected. There was no public war, no dramatic exchange of accusations. Instead, the two continued to speak positively about one another. They remained friends. Jennifer later made an important point about her marriages. A relationship ending, she suggested, doesn't automatically mean it was a failure. A marriage can be meaningful even if it doesn't last forever. That perspective tells you something about how Jennifer views love. For her, the value of a relationship isn't necessarily measured by whether it reaches the finish line. Sometimes the journey itself matters. The Brad Pitt reunion. Years after their divorce, Jennifer and Brad surprised fans by appearing together at public events. Then came the famous virtual table read of Fast Times at Ridgemont High. The two actors played characters involved in a flirtatious scene. The internet immediately exploded. Fans couldn't believe they were watching Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt together again. But Jennifer later treated the whole experience as fun. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no secret wedding, no confirmation that they were getting back together. Just two former partners who had reached a point where they could laugh together again. That may actually be the most mature ending their story could have had. Because sometimes closure doesn't mean getting back together. Sometimes closure means being able to remember what happened without allowing the past to control your future. But was Brad really the love of her life? This is where Jennifer's story becomes especially interesting. For years, the public treated Brad Pitt as the obvious answer. He was the husband, the movie star, the man whose divorce from Jennifer became one of the biggest celebrity stories of the era. But Jennifer herself has never seemed comfortable with the phrase, love of my life. When asked about Brad in the past, she resisted reducing the relationship to a dramatic label. And that makes her earlier comments about Daniel McDonald even more fascinating. Because Daniel existed before fame, before money, before Rachel Green, before the paparazzi, before Jennifer had an entire world watching her. He knew her when she was simply Jennifer. Not Jennifer Aniston. Not one of the highest-paid television actresses. Not a global celebrity. Just a young woman trying to become an actress. And perhaps that is why the memory of him remains so powerful. The tragedy of Daniel McDonald. There is another heartbreaking layer to this story. Daniel McDonald died in 2007 after battling cancer. He was only 46 years old. Jennifer later spoke about him with obvious affection. His death transformed an old relationship into something that could never be revisited. There would be no reunion, no conversation years later, no chance to wonder what might have happened if they had stayed together. Only memories. And sometimes that kind of loss makes people reconsider the roads they didn't take. Jennifer had gone on to become one of the biggest stars in the world. She had experienced enormous professional success. She had married famous men. She had built friendships that lasted decades. But there was still this one chapter from her youth that could never be rewritten. What Jennifer's story really says about love. Maybe the most important part of Jennifer Aniston's story isn't deciding which man was the real love of her life. Maybe it's understanding that love doesn't always have one definition. Daniel McDonald may have represented her first great love. Brad Pitt represented a marriage and a defining chapter of her adult life. Justin Theroux represented another serious partnership. Other relationships brought their own lessons, and each one contributed something different to the person Jennifer eventually became. That may be why Jennifer has consistently resisted the idea that a relationship must be labeled a success or failure. Some people stay, some people leave, some people become friends, and some people remain in your memories forever. A new chapter. Today, Jennifer Aniston is no longer the young actress trying to get her first big break. She survived the rise of tabloid culture. She survived one of the most publicized divorces in Hollywood history. She survived years of pregnancy rumors. She survived professional pressure and personal heartbreak. And somehow she continued working. She became an award-winning actress, producer, a businesswoman, and one of the most recognizable stars of her generation. But perhaps the biggest change is that Jennifer seems less interested in proving anything to the public. She doesn't need to explain every relationship. She doesn't need to announce who her soulmate is. And she certainly doesn't need to convince anyone that her life is complete. Her story has become much more complicated than that. Because behind the celebrity headlines is a woman who has experienced love, loss, disappointment, success, and grief just like anyone else. The difference is that millions of people were watching. The love she never forgot. So when Jennifer Aniston looked back at Daniel McDonald and described him as her first love, there was something quietly powerful about it. She wasn't talking about the biggest celebrity romance of her career. She wasn't talking about the man who dominated magazine covers with her. She wasn't talking about the relationship fans spent years debating. She was talking about someone from before the fame. Someone from before the world decided who Jennifer Aniston was supposed to be. And perhaps that's why the story still resonates. Because most people have a relationship like that. Maybe it was a first love. Maybe it was someone they met before life became complicated. Maybe it was someone they thought they would spend forever with. And then life happened. People grew apart. Careers changed. Circumstances changed. But the memory remained. Jennifer Aniston's story reminds us that the person who changes your life isn't always the person who stays in it forever. Sometimes the greatest love stories don't end with a wedding. Sometimes they end with a memory. And sometimes, decades later, you look back and realize that the person you once loved helped shape the person you eventually became. Jennifer found enormous success after Daniel. She became Rachel Green. She became a movie star. She became one of Hollywood's most recognizable women. But before any of that happened, she was simply a young actress who fell in love with another young actor. And perhaps that's why Daniel McDonald will always hold a unique place in her story. Not because he became the most famous man she ever dated, but because he knew her before the world did. Before the fame. Before the headlines. Before Hollywood decided to turn her love life into entertainment. And maybe that's the real reason Jennifer's memories of him remain so powerful. Because some people don't need to be in your life forever to become part of you forever. What do you think? Was Daniel McDonald the forgotten love story of Jennifer Aniston's life? Or do you believe another relationship truly deserves that title? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Jennifer Aniston's untold Hollywood story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more celebrity stories, forgotten romances, and behind-the-scenes moments that Hollywood never tells the full story about.